we all know the cost of nursing home care is staggering, with the average stay in a nursing home being 2.29 years, I should say. It is reported that as many as 80% of aging adults lack the financial resources to pay for that care, and seniors can lose all of that in that crisis. So today, in the Legal Know, Vincent J. Russo will focus on exempt transfers, which can protect your assets if you need Medicaid nursing home care. That 29 years wasn't necessarily a mistake. My grandmother was in a nursing home for 16 years. It was such a long time. So it is a very difficult thing. So what's the problem here with having someone you love in a nursing home on Medicaid?
Sure, and that's something. 16 plus years. She was an exception to the general rule.
Yeah.
She usually just a couple years. But there's a serious problem, and I've been talking about it for decades, which is that we have a broken healthcare system. We do not take care of our seniors and people with disabilities. We have that Medicare program. It's great if you got to see a doctor or go to a hospital for treatment or surgery, but Medicare does not cover long-term care. Long-term care, assistance with activities of daily living. That's eating, bathing, dressing, going to the bathroom, supervision. People with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's may need that kind of care. And Medicare says, no, we don't cover you. It's a disgrace, quite frankly.
So is there something is there a government program that would help someone like that?
Yes, thankfully there is another program, and that's Medicaid. Unfortunately, it's financially means tested. That means that if you have assets in your name or too much income, you may not qualify for Medicaid. So seniors are forced to do Medicaid planning. And so it's really important to understand that if you have assets in your name, you're likely going to be denied Medicaid, and nursing home care is so expensive. It's over $100,000 a year on average. In New York area, over $150,000. So exempt transfers come into play in Medicaid planning for someone in crisis. Certain assets can be transferred without a penalty. Medicaid looks back 5 years to see if you've transferred assets, and then they deny you Medicaid coverage for a certain number of months. So let's look at the list of who can receive an exempt transfer.
Sure.
First, spouses. So if you're married, you can transfer your assets to another spouse. There's no limit on how much. And that's exempt. You will not be penalized. But be careful, because if one spouse applies for Medicaid, they look at the assets of both spouses and they give some protection there. But an exempt transfer between spouses, really important. Two is you can transfer assets to a child who is disabled of any age or in a trust for the child's sole benefit. That child could be a minor, or it could be a child who's 60 years old because the parents are in their 80s.
Right.
And then the third group is a trust for a disabled person under age 65. So not the child, but let's say it's a niece or a grandchild. You can transfer assets to a trust for the sole benefit of that person under age 65 who's disabled. So these are three situations where if someone is facing a nursing home care in a crisis, needs Medicaid, they could transfer those assets so they can qualify for coverage.
So in that third case, does that have to be a relative, or it can be anyone that you are caring for in some way?
Interestingly, it can be anyone.
Okay.
And that's a lot of people don't understand that at all. They think, well, you have to be a relative of some, connection, or a child, a grandchild, for example. So those are wonderful exceptions. Planning in advance, obviously, is most important. Then they have a different set of rules for houses.
Okay, so tell us about that. What's the deal with houses?
So now we get several exempt transfers for houses. So when you own your house, it's exempt for Medicaid, but when you pass away, they put a lien on it and they have an estate recovery.
Okay.
So it would be in the best interests of that individual and their family to transfer those assets, like the house. So now we get these rules. One, here again, spouse. Transfer the house from the one applying for Medicaid to the spouse who's in the community. Second, a child under age 21. Sounds odd that you would give it to someone who's a minor, but that's an exception in the rule. Third one is a disabled child of any age. So similar to any asset, like earlier I mentioned, the house is included in that.
Okay.
The next one is a sibling, a brother or sister with an equity interest. So Mary owns a house and she lives with her brother who helps pay the bills. She could transfer it to the brother without a penalty. And then lastly, a caregiver child, and the rule is if a child lives with the parent and they take care of the parent for at least 2 years prior to filing for Medicaid, then the house can be transferred to the child. It's almost like a thank you.
Okay.
We'll allow that child to continue to live in the home. So, I don't know who comes up with these rules, but they're important. You have to understand what can or can't be done.
So is there a time frame of when that transfer of assets or home before someone goes into nursing care that's necessary?
Yes, that's the infamous 5-year look-back rule. So for nursing home care, Medicaid, when you file, says we're going to look back 5 years and see if you made any gifts. And if they're exempt, okay. If they're not exempt, sorry, we're not going to cover you for Medicaid for a period of time.
Okay. So that's part of the estate planning, right?
Right.
To be able to think about that perhaps before someone needs to be in nursing care.
Absolutely. So back on January 31st, I was here. We talked about Medicaid Asset Protection Trust.
Right.
And you can see the show on Catholic Faith Network, /CFN-Live, or on my website. We host the shows. And so that's a show where I spent time talking about how you could place assets, including a home, into a trust in advance of the 5 years. And that allows those assets to be available for you in certain ways, but protects it in terms of Medicaid eligibility.
Right. Vincent, I know your time with us is so valuable, and I know people really appreciate it. You mentioned the website. Anything else on the website that might be helpful for people to look at?
Sure, we have lots of information on that website, but the one today I want to point out is our Medicaid Planning Guide, and that would be very helpful. So pjrussolaw.com/guides. And I hope everybody takes advantage of this.
Well, thanks again. It kind of gives me a little anxiety thinking about my own parents, but having information like what you have to offer and really thinking and planning, I think takes a lot of that anxiety away from people. So thank you so much for being with us again today.
Our pleasure. My pleasure.